Man, it's weird having to talk about the trans thing as often as we do, but like, let's be honest, there's so much ire aimed at trans people on the internet, it confuses the shit out of me. So I gotta ask the question for people, like, if you're legitimately against trans people, you don't like trans people, what have you, what is your reason as to why? Why do you not like trans people? Why do you hate trans people? I need to know. Let me know in the comments section below if that is what you want to do. Hey, and maybe even subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Maybe somebody's asking about your open opinions before he makes fun of you. Maybe you find value in that. But when I say that, I'm saying that because I don't quite understand the phenomenon of everybody being so virulently anti-trans. At the end of the day, the trans person is living their own life, and they want other people to be able to live their own life as well. And you have to twist yourself into knots to argue that they're doing anything other than that. Like, consider this. When somebody is trans and they recognize that they were trans very early on in their life, they knew from the time they were 4 or 6, you know, kind of like Blair White, and they explain that phenomenon to other people, the right wing turns that into trans people are trying to indoctrinate children. How do you get to that point? How do you come to that conclusion when a teacher simply respects a kid's pronouns? A kid says, hey, maybe call me a her, maybe my name isn't Bob, it's Morticia, or whatever the fuck. And the teacher respects that for a minute. The right turns that into our schools are indoctrinating kids with gender ideology. It's confusing to me. I can understand not believing that somebody is trans. I can get that 100%. I used to be that way. I didn't look at the research into it. I was arrogant enough to think that that's what that's what the position should be. I didn't have a wonderful resource like Vice Rhino's documents on trans research that are all here for you to read at any point that you can see right here. And if you need to see them on mobile, there's even a QR code right here that you could click that I cannot get to resize to show you. So fuck, I'm done. But while I could understand disagreeing with somebody that they are in fact trans or that being trans isn't real, what I can't understand is being such an asshole about it. As an example here, we have Sarah Fields, whose name is Sarah is censored, despite the fact that she has 420,000 followers and is able to speak her mind on the internet. But don't worry, Sarah is censored. And she says, for Trans Day of Visibility, I just want to remind trans women that they cannot do this and they never will because they're not women. And she shows a picture of, I assume, her pregnant out in the woods. What do you gain from that? What does that mean? What does that do for you? Like, what do you gain from being this much of an asshole? I'm just curious here. So, like, you can argue that trans people are rubbing their identity into your face, and it's a problem for you, and you don't like that. But then this is the kind of stuff that you do. Again, I'm just confused. Where the fuck are you coming from? I don't understand. And oh, by the way, just so you guys know, this is not something that is never going to be the case for trans women. First of all, ignoring the messiness of the word trans and how it could mean somebody who's non-binary and therefore they feel like a woman that day, so technically they're a trans woman, despite the fact that they were born with a uterus regardless. Ignoring those weird, fuzzy, fucky details, I don't give a shit about any of that. Just speaking about trans women for a second here. Just out of curiosity, what will you do when this is done? So this is from 2018. This is a study on how likely it is that we will be able to do uterine transplants for trans women, not only to help alleviate bits of gender dysphoria, but also to make it so that they actually can have children. You're worried about birth rates? Trust me, when people can start breeding the fucking trans women, you have no idea how much the US population will skyrocket. Trust me. You want to see the Quiverful movement not actually ever die a death? Easiest way is to get trans women pregnant. I promise you, you have no idea how many of them have a breeding kink. Jesus fucking Christ. So, again, what happens in the world when we, and science as a whole, is able to actually perform uterine transplants for trans women? It used to be, well, you're not really a woman. You're never going to act like one. But, I mean, that was easy enough to emulate. Then it's, you're not going to be a woman. You don't sound like one. But, like, my editor is actually an expert in training people's voices to sound female. Hell, I've actually done a femme voice on stream before. Maybe I'll actually ask K-Fox to help me hone that for funsies. I'm not trans, but I also do voice acting and have done it as a paid gig, so it's not bad to have a voice like that in my repertoire that I'm able to put down a little better. So yeah, K-Fox, I haven't sent this message to you in Discord, but hey, there's that. Where was I going? Where was I going with any of this? Oh, right. And then it's, oh, well, you don't look like women, but we have facial feminization surgery, we have top surgery, we have HRT, which changes the fat distribution for trans people. Like, we have a lot of scientific advancements when it comes to transitioning. So then it's, well, you don't have a vagina. Again, vaginoplasty. Vaginoplasty is the thing. And then you get people like Tim Pool that spread the idea like, actually, that's a wound that will close if you don't constantly insert it. That's not a real vagina. But then you understand that there's new versions of vaginoplasty now that actually require less dilation. There's actually trans women who don't need to dilate at all down there anymore. It's just a thing that can happen. And then you get people saying, well, that's not really a vagina, that's an inverted penis. But then you find out about vaginoplasty that actually uses parts of the colon to create the exact same tissue that exists in the vagina. The only difference really was location, but all of the mechanics like self-lubrication and all of that are now all available to trans women. Like, the more we get, the one thing that you never actually hear about is trans people's clitorises. Like, that one's never talked about because most people who obsess about trans women already can't fucking find the clit. I'm actually, just a side thing. You know how we constantly find that, like, right-wingers who try to strip trans people of their rights, you know how we constantly find that those people actually watch a lot of trans porn? Do you think that that's because they need they need a girl who actually has a dick down there so they can find the fucking clit? That headcanon. That's a headcanon for me. The reason you find people who are constantly against trans women's rights, but also just happen to watch a lot of trans porn, I think it's because they cannot please their wives and they fantasize about somebody that they actually can please. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just the taboo stuff. I don't know. Maybe I'm saying things that are nightmarishly insulting. Not 100% certain. Don't really care. Also, this is ignoring the fact that on Trans Day of Visibility, we tend to focus a lot on trans women, and we tend to forget about trans men. They kind of get lost in all of this because, let's be honest, once a trans man has gone through phalloplasty and voice therapy and has received top surgery, like, if you want to talk about people who can't be clocked, you're not gonna fucking tell. You can't tell. Again, why aim ire at them? What does that benefit you? What do you gain from that? And it's not just one person. Obviously, I can find this in a lot of areas. Now, these are responses to Rev Says Desu, who's a bigot and an idiot, but of course, you know, my sample size is going to be bigots and idiots. We have people like Glitchilla saying the trans agenda is fundamentally about grooming children. How? We have no evidence to support that. But you think, like I said, in the beginning of this, you turn a trans person saying, I found out I was trans at 5 or 6, so I want people to be comfortable figuring that shit out the same way I figured it out. And you somehow warp that into grooming children. I said it happened in the beginning of the video, and here you are doing that shit as well. When you say, like, and the deranged activists pushing it aren't even trying to hide it anymore. I've seen it firsthand. People openly threatening to indoctrinate kids into their sick, perverted ideology. Ah, yes! Threatening to indoctrinate children, showing them that trans women real. Trans men real. This is a thing that can happen. Oh no, you watched a TV show that had a trans woman in it. Oh no, you're ruined forever. You watched Star Wars The Acolyte and you saw Philosophy Tube and you saw that she is in fact a woman who used to be male. Wow, congratulations. You're so cool. You've been fundamentally ruined for life. Life has destroyed you completely, except that doesn't really fucking happen at all. Then we get people like Akatsuki, and I want to agree with this, actually. I really do, because I have this shit in my community to a degree, and it does bother me in my community, but it's ultimately kind of fucking harmless. Akatsuki saying, I don't know, but whenever I see one of these freaks using the term cracking eggs, it makes my blood boil. This is nothing but pure evil, and yet they call us the monsters for not accepting the whole trans children bullshit. Trans kids don't exist. They're just victims of these people. Again, what happens when a trans woman who was not groomed, who was in a conservative family like Blair White, says publicly on the internet that she knew she was trans from like 4 or 5 years old?
I was probably in 1st or 2nd grade, looks like it. And yeah, that was me as a little person. And I know people are going to ask if I felt transgender back then at this point in my life when this picture was taken. It's a little bit complicated. I would have never put it in the word transgender back then. I do remember feeling very odd at that age. I felt like there was something different about me, something that no one else around me could relate to. I felt extremely feminine to be a boy. So developmentally, it was a very weird point in my life because I had just started at that age coming to see the differences between men and women and feeling like I didn't really fit in the male category, if that makes sense. But I was by no means miserable. That came later.
What word do you use for that kid other than trans kid? Like, that is a descriptor of what that kid is. When that trans adult looks back on their life, they're going to say that they were a trans kid. So I am sorry, but that's the word you would use. It's not boiling. It shouldn't boil your blood. Again, there is an aspect of the egg cracking thing that I find a little cringe, that bugs the shit out of me, because again, I'm not trans, but my audience, because I use a female avatar on the internet a lot, all assume that I'm trans. And then there's that one fucking idiot who I'm not going to name, who says that I'm an ugly man and therefore I would make an ugly trans woman, and that's why I don't transition. Yeah, I've seen your video. I'm not going to give you any attention, you fucking moron. Like, when I see shit like that, it bothers me when I see the egg cracking thing, because I'm like, it's not the case, and it's agitating when it's the 300th time that I've seen somebody say that. However, it's also ultimately fucking harmless. Like, if somebody thinks I'm trans, who cares? I can correct Matt Powell on it all day long because he still thinks I'm trans. That guy's weird as shit. I can correct him. It's not going to change anything. Ask yourself why this shit makes you mad. Then we have Mike DA Pro, every transgender is either a pedophile or a victim of pedophiles. Well, if they're all pedophiles, and we can all agree that pedophiles are predators to children and probably don't need to be walking outside, then what would you say we should be doing about trans women? Again, ask yourself why you think that. Ask yourself what you think a pedophile is and why you think that word applies to a trans woman. Remember, if we are talking about the same groups of people, these are the kinds of people who argued that the left uses the term Nazi to argue about people they don't like. But that's all this is. You call anybody you don't like a pedophile. That's the same shit. And again, I say trans women because when you think about trans men, you're usually not going to be able to fucking tell. Not that you can always tell with trans women either. But like, one of these groups does have it a little easier. Cybershill says, I've never seen egg cracking in a serious context. There's just joking about providing potential trans NB friends the tools they need to process that just in case. So remember, though, like the conversation about Miyatsu earlier about perspective. When you are person 300 who makes the same egg cracking joke, and I'm the person who has seen it 300 times aimed at me, even if all of them meant it in jest and all of them meant it in order to be decent and jovial, it will cease being that way to the person who sees it for the 300th time. Because no matter how thick your skin is, there is a limit for everyone. Trace James says, I know what a pedophile is. They look like Cheeto oranges. They struggle to speak coherently and they run the country. Yeah, again, like if you want to find pedophiles, look at the people who are on the Epstein list. And one of them happens to be, you know, Trump. But then there's this one. This one confuses the shit out of me. So this is Brianna Wu. And Brianna Wu came out as trans like a year and a half ago. And everybody knew, like, it wasn't actually something people didn't know. I was in a group chat with her, and this, if memory serves, again, memory's not great, but there were people surprised that it was not common knowledge that she was trans in that group. I remember her asking people to take posts down that hinted that she might be trans, but I see where she's coming from now because, well, look at this post. I hate Transgender Day of Visibility. Why? Why do you hate a day about normalizing being trans? What the fuck is wrong with you? Are you actually an idiot? The answer is yes. Dead Domain has an entire video about Brianna Wu. Go check it out. The answer to is she an idiot is actually a resounding yes. But deciding to publicly come out as trans is the biggest mistake I ever made in my entire career. I believe we will lose all rights on this course, and I thought I could help us move to the center. To the center? You thought it would be better for us to move to the center? You think the fence is a better place to stay than, you know, on principles? That's really funny. But there's no constituency for moderate public policy. Because again, what is moderate public policy on trans people? We already had a decent bit of public policy that allowed trans people to transition and allowed them to exist out in normal space. But then you get Project 2025 saying that we need to turn being trans into pornography and then use that as a way to outlaw being trans out in public. What's the center there? What's the moderate there between using science to write our legislation and using Christian fifis to write our legislation? What's the center there, Brianna? Please explain. I wish I just kept my mouth shut. Yeah, I wish that too. Enjoyed my life and my marriage and let all the nutcases leading our movement own their failure. Being trans literally does not affect my life because I did the work to integrate. That's what every single sister should be focused on instead of this trans day of visibility bullshit. Actual trans women just want to make it to the other side. So, you may be right that there are plenty of trans women who just want to make it to the other side in stealth. There are plenty of trans women who want to do that. But you know what's cool? You know which people force trans people to make being trans such a major part of their identity constantly? The people who are trying to take away their rights. Brianna, you live in a world where trans, like actual laws against trans people are being written damn near every day in this country. Hold on, you know what? So I tried to look at the trans law tracker that actually showcases this live, but I couldn't find it. So instead I'll have to rely on the legal risk assessment map that is on Aaron's page here. Again, you know what makes people talk about themselves being gay more often? When their homosexuality is something that they have to fight for. You know what makes people talk about being black more often? When they are told that they are inherently violent for being black, for being born with more melanin in their fucking skin. You know what causes trans people to make being trans such a more important part of their identity? Put simply, people writing fucking legislation and making entire careers out of dunking on trans people for being trans. Like, how, again, where's the fucking center there? Also, when you say actual trans women want to make it to the other side, why invalidate every person that does want to make it to the other side, but also wants to make sure that the bridge is still available for everybody else on the way there? Trans women and trans men. If you're an adult, let me know in the comment section below which you want. Do you want trans people to transition and then you cut the bridge away from under you and leave them for their own accords? Or do you want to transition and then let your lived experience be something that helps people? The perspective where, oh, you just want to make it to the other side in stealth, that's the better thing to do. It's a very selfish perspective. It is the perspective of somebody who doesn't want to use their lived experiences to actually help people. Instead, you pal around with a bunch of people on the right wing and say that that's you being a centrist or some dumb shit. Lady Marilyn says that map is out of date. Again, I do not have the actual deployed map right now. It is down at the moment. And then to get the other side of this as well. The Lone Star, Starkelt says no one is free until we're all free, no one is safe until we're all safe. Agreed. Naki Bree says, I've got mine, the MAGA mentality. That's basically what it is. I don't think Brianna Wu's a hateful person. I just think she's kind of a stupid person in these regards. I remember a conversation in group chat with her and a few other people. It was a fight between her and Demon Mama before the weird shit came out about Demon Mama and her partners. This is years ago. And I remember the fight being the fact that Demon Mama was talking about trans sports and how trans women should be allowed in trans sports. And Brianna instead wanted to cede that ground and say, that's a scapegoat, actually. That's the red herring. We don't need to be fighting on that ground. That's the one that makes people make fun of us. Like, I don't know if you understand the term give an inch, take a mile, but if you cede ground somewhere, you eventually cede ground everywhere there. There is a tactic in debate called granting the argument, and you do it to show that even in the strongest version of somebody's argument, they are incorrect. But that's not ceding ground. Ceding ground is something like letting people in, Ohio, write legislation that affects all of 3 trans people and ruins their ability to have a school allow them on a fucking team. 3 people spending all of your resources targeting 3 fucking kids. The idea is not to cede ground anywhere, because politics isn't actually a war of attrition. We can have people who are lobbying for multiple things all at once, actually. And I remember that being the argument that was posed to her. And I wanted to bring Brianna on for a conversation in regards to that. And I remember, like, multiple times her saying that there was some reason that she couldn't. After saying that she could, I wanted her to bring her position in a video form, and then I was going to talk about it. But, you know, here we are. Maybe I'm actually really glad I never did that collab, ultimately, seeing how things have turned out. But the other side of this, we get Ember Talks, who's a VTuber and is trans, who is responding here to somebody saying, I realized that this dude was a disgusting... You know what? Fuck it. You can read it. You can read the word. I don't know how I didn't catch that. Whoop-de-doo, you'll never be whatever you want to be. Boo-hoo. And then they made a post saying, lady boy or boy lady. Now, granted, there is a subset of people who are actually okay with that term. Some of them, I believe, are in Thailand, but like most people here in America aren't really super great with that term, so I don't like using it personally. Also, I don't see anything boy about my girlfriend personally. What the fuck ever. But Ember has to respond to this saying, good riddance. I came out as trans as a VTuber a year ago, specifically because I didn't want to cater to sensitive snowflake fascists who can't handle a girl with a dick existing. I was told constantly from within the VTuber community, you can't be a successful VTuber, VA, ASMRist, and to be out as trans. How is that? How? Yes, the fuck you can. I was encouraged to stay silent about who I am for my career. Yet a year later, after being out, I'm still one of the top performing ASM artists and VA YouTubers in my niche and growing to an even broader audience. I'm successful and happy, and that fucking terrifies y'all, makes all of y'all uncomfortable, and I hope it continues to do so. Love wins. You see, on the other side of this, you get people like Ember who are saying, hey, actually, coming out as trans was a good thing for me, and I'm happy to be trans. So when you're throwing all of that ire at trans people, this is the kind of person you're throwing that ire at. Somebody who's having to deal with harassment constantly simply for existing as who she is. What do you gain from throwing that ire there? What is making life, like what in your life is improving when you do that? And there is no better example of this phenomenon getting out of fucking hand than libs of TikTok on Transgender Day of Visibility saying this trans terrorist shot up a school and killed 6 people. Now, let's grant for the moment that the person that she's talking about is trans. Let's grant for a moment that all of this happened. This is all real. And let's ask ourselves what is being communicated here. She's not saying... Here's a singular person who shot people. That's the surface level argument. What she's actually saying is there is a pandemic of trans people who will shoot your children. That's what she's saying. That's what's being said underneath this statement. Now, why is she saying that? Well, because there's a bunch of people who right now are actually working for news organizations who are writing articles like this. Back-to-back public shootings prompts reflection on the history of trans mass killers. The history of trans mass killers? The noted history of people who are trans and commit mass murder and implied do so because they're trans? Wow, that's so weird. What's your name? Elaine Mallon? What are you doing right now? Oh, you're working for Fox News. Right. She's a national politics reporter for Fox News now. She previously was at the National News Desk where she wrote this. And now she is over at Fox News making the argument that a ton of trans shooters are killing people implied because they are trans. And yet, when you actually look at the evidence on this, very few mass shooters have actually been transgender. Since an alleged shooter who identified as transgender killed 2 children and injured 21 others at a Catholic church in Minneapolis on August 27th, some Republicans have suggested that transgender individuals show a pattern of violence or are responsible for many mass shootings in the United States. And of course, there are links to the New York Times article on this, where Trump administration is saying that they're looking into transgender people being prohibited from purchasing guns via red flag laws. But we actually don't have any data that suggests that trans people are more likely than any other person to commit these kinds of violent acts at all. The 5 mass shootings in the gun violence archive with a transgender shooting suspect are the August shooting in Minneapolis, the March one in Nashville, one in November 2022 at a gay bar in Colorado Springs, and one in 2019, and one in 2018. The gender identity of the alleged Perry shooter, Dylan Butler, wasn't established at the time that that one was used. So even this massive number, 5 people, massive over the last... There are more mass shootings than days in a year in the United States. For those who don't know, that's an unfortunate statistic we live with. So except that in the last 10 years, we've had, between 5 and 7 trans shooters. Of the break out my calculator here, this is just basic number shit. If there's a mass shooting every day, 365 times the last 10 years, out of the 3,650 mass shooters, there have been 7. 7 people. 7 people. And let me just get my numbers correct. Let's make sure that I've got all my data right. Never mind, I undershot. According to the Gun Violence Archive, the total number of incidents since 2013, so 3 or 4 more years than I was calculating, is actually closer to 28,000 people have engaged in mass shootings. So of the 28,000 mass shooters in America since 2013, 7 have been trans. And because we don't actually know the gender identity specifically of some of the shooters, it's technically between 5 and 7, because those numbers may be weirder. And yet, ask yourself, why is it that despite the overwhelming data showing that trans people aren't grooming children, aren't mass shooting, aren't doing these things, you still get people like Elaine Mallon saying, hey, we need to reflect on the history of trans mass killers. You get people like the dipshit running libs of TikTok saying that, oh, Trans Day of Visibility, here's this trans terrorist that shot and killed 6 people. Again, granting that that is what happened, that's not what's being communicated here. She's communicating that a pandemic of trans people are engaging in these violent crimes, but that's not really what's happening. None of the data suggests that, and these people should be made fun of for all of that. Ask yourself, why, when we have actual evidence showing that the suicidality of trans people goes down when they are accepted and they're able to take hormone therapy, why, in a world where things like social contagion and rapid onset gender dysphoria, arguments the right has used a lot, have been disproven as false, why, in a world where we have tons of data, tons of research, tons of studies showing that trans people are normal and a-okay, why do we somehow also live in the world where you are aiming so much of your ire at them? Again, if you are somebody that doesn't like trans people, doesn't think it's real, what have you, give me your argument, give me what you think in the comment section below. Again, maybe sub after that. I'm willing to hear you out, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video on some of the arguments they are talking about what I see. But I don't understand it. Again, when I was anti-trans, I did not talk about it as much as these dumb motherfuckers do. When I was anti-trans, I did not make it an argument that I hinged most of my beliefs on. It didn't fucking matter to me. I still respected people's pronouns when they when they threw them at me after high school. I was way more arrogant in high school. I have one friend who might have watched this video, who was a friend of me in high school, who will call bullshit on me respecting pronouns all the time, and that person will be correct, because in high school, I fucking did not. They are correct. Anyway, why do you hate them? What do you gain by hating them? And understand that when all the data we have shows that stigmatizing them further actually does increase suicidality, I'm willing to argue that that is still a form of hatred. Why do you feel that way? Why do you feel it's appropriate? Why is that what you want to do? Why is that what you fill your time with? When you live your life and you're on your deathbed and you are thinking about all of the people who you could have helped, could have been nice to, could have been friends with, and you are left thinking about the people who you were cruel to, ask yourself, why was the cruelty worth it for you? Why was that what you wanted to engage in? Why is that the legacy that you decided you wanted to leave? And one thing I'm not going to ask why is why do I think that's pathetic? I'll make a follow-up video explaining why I think that's the pathetic if you really want. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitt, you know I'm not saying that last part, Sylvie Snow, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.